Thunderball was released in 1965, once again just a year after the previous film. Boy were Bond fans lucky back then. Having stepped away from Spectre during Goldfinger, Thunderball once again pits Bond against the organisation after it holds the world ransom by stealing 2 atomic bombs during a NATO training exercise. Bond travels to Nassau to investigate a lead which would eventually bring him to the Playboy pirate Emilio Largo, number 2 in the Spectre ranks. Thunderball had a troubled history ever since its conception. In 1959, Ian Fleming, along with writer and director Kevin McClory, as well as others, began to pen a screenplay for a James Bond movie, titled Thunderball. After McClory's own film received disappointing reviews, Fleming became disenchanted with the idea and returned to his Jamaican home to write the novel Thunderball instead. Upon its publication in 1961, McClory pressed charges and the rights became entangled in a long, arduous legal battle, one that would not be resolved until the end of 1963, whereupon Fleming kept the rights to the novel, but McClory held the rights for a film adaptation. It was originally going to be the first 007 film to be made by Eon, but due to the legal dispute, that idea was dropped. By 1964, however, Saltzman and Broccoli feared McClory would make a rival Bond film, and agreed to adapt Thunderball together, with McClory receiving sole producer credit. Oh, and that whole rival Bond film? Yeah, we'll get onto that later. Perhaps it's due to this difference in production that led Thunderball to be an awkward entry into the series. A case of too many cooks, maybe. The film glides over plot points that potentially could have been interesting to explore further. Stealing the NATO pilot's identity via plastic surgery, for example, is limited to just one brief scene. Instead, the film dwells on long underwater sequences where we're often left quite literally in the dark. The heavy focus on such scenes can be credited to McClory's own interest in diving, and whilst the idea of an underwater battle sounds brilliant, the climactic fight between Spectre henchmen and Navy SEALs feels weak. Nothing has any real impact, and a lot of it just seems like innocuous flailing. The complex production of 4 separate filming units could also have led to a mismatch when it came to editing. Some shots transition clumsily, whilst others, particularly the fight scenes, contain jarring cuts that ruin the flow. On the subject of post-production, though the Bond films have always contained some dubious dubbing, it does seem particularly bad at times in Thunderball.
Who was he?
Like I said, a small fish, working for a Mr. Largo. He's got a yacht we should take a look at later.
Whilst Bond's extravagant romancing and romping is almost compulsory by this point, it does detract from the supposed threat of atomic bombs detonating in only a few days' time. Though Bond says himself,
My dear girl, don't flatter yourself. What I did this evening was for king and country. You don't think it gave me any pleasure, do you?
there's no denying a sense of urgency and pressure is lost when he takes the time to do this. Adolfo Celli's Largo is a perfectly acceptable villain, if nothing more. The unexplained eye patch does seem like a rather uninspired way of distinguishing the character. Sadly, it's not until the very end of the film where he's able to appear genuinely menacing, alone with Dominique and ready to torture. Fiona Volpe, on the other hand, makes for a refreshing change concerning the Bond girls, the difference being that she isn't really a Bond girl at all. Following the criticism of Goldfinger and Pussy Galore's sudden moral transformation, Volpe remains evil despite Bond's seduction, something she remarks upon herself.
James Bond, who only has to make love to a woman and she starts to hear heavenly choir singing. She repents and immediately returns to the side of right and virtue. But not this one.
A highlight of the film, however, is not a car chase or a set piece, it's a small quiet scene between Bond and Dominique. As he's informing her about the death of her beloved brother Francois, evident by recovering his dog tags, watch Bond's hand. Visibly shaken, he then hides any emotions behind sunglasses. It's an early example of exploring Bond's psyche, and begins to form him into a more complex character. Contrary to his martinis, you could say Bond was shaken and stirred. Oh.
Well, we can't win them all.
Despite said flaws, Thunderball was another hugely successful hit at the box office, so much so that adjusting for inflation, it's the second highest grossing entry behind Skyfall. People were going mad for the 007 character, that is apart from Sean Connery himself. With the increasingly intrusive press hounding his personal life, as well as the fear of being typecast, Connery was growing tired of Bond, but under contract still had 2 more films to make. Saltzman and Broccoli therefore adjusted his contract to release him from the series, but not until after his long-awaited confrontation with Spectre number 1.
See you later, alligator.